was easy. Okay. We're going to have a very informal few toasts to Andrew. First off, before we start this, I just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. This is amazing. Andrew would have loved this. He would have loved it after 5 beers because he would have had a lot of anxiety, but then he would have really loved it. A couple things I want to note. There are postcards and bookmarks. Please take one with you. Actually, please take 10 with you because I printed a lot. Also, at the back of the room, it's kind of hard to see, but as I was going through Andrew's things, I want to point out there's a poster that Andrew flew to Paris in August 2000. And, you know, you'll hear a few things about my brother, but he loved to ask to go to the cockpit. That was his thing. This is pre-9/11. And he asked if he could go to the cockpit on the flight, and they let him in. And he chatted with the pilot, the captain. The captain wrote him a letter to the LA Times the next day. And it was incredible. And so you can read the letter there. And then about a month and a half later, Andrew wrote Robert Milton a letter to say what an incredible flight it was and how he couldn't believe the captain wrote him a letter. And then a month after that, Robert Milton wrote Andrew back and said, can't believe you took the time to write this letter and say what a great flight it was and how great the captain was. So it's pretty cool. And then I got some pictures from the cockpit that he took on his flight to Paris. So also there's a guest book there if you could sign it. And Andrew had a massive beer glass collection. Pretty sure he stole every glass. I already apologized to the pilot if a few of theirs are there, but it would be really great if you could take a glass home with you, one that you'd like. Just there's Post-it notes there. Throw your name on a glass and take it with you. It would be super helpful for me to not have to clear them out. But there are actually some pretty nice glasses. In fact, my daughter already stole one tonight. And I was like, Jesus Christ, Sarah, we have so many of these. So please take a glass in Andrew's honor, and you can mark your name on them now. I also want to point out that Andrew's friend Khalid, right there, Khalid, give a little wave.
Hi.
Khalid published 2 books for Andrew on all his letters to the editors. So we put 2 copies out if people want to take a look. And I put a set of readers out there and someone stole them. So please, if you have a set of readers that aren't yours, just throw them back on the books. So, I mean, again, I have millions of them, but so a few of Andrew's friends are going to say a few words, and I'm going to call up first one of his dearest and oldest friends, Paul Taylor.
So this is very hard for me, so I'll try not to break down. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Paul Taylor. I've known Andrew for over 40 years. We met through a mutual friend, Martin Milstead, who's going to be talking later on. And the 2 of them met when they were involved in various aspects of the peace movement in the early 1980s. The first thing I want to say, it does make a difference, doesn't it? The first thing I want to say was Andrew was a voracious reader, especially newspapers. That made him extremely well informed about what was happening in the world. He was a very generous person and wanted to share his knowledge. But Andrew was also very knowledgeable about his friends, and he knew what they were interested in particular. I'm interested in space and science. My wife Bronwyn, who's there, like art, architecture, and museums. So Andrew would routinely put together packages of newspaper clippings that he knew we would enjoy. Occasionally, he would also include a copy of the Buffalo Evening News, because Bronwyn grew up in Western New York State. Andrew dropped off his final package just days before he died. Even though he was debilitated by the side effects of his radiation and chemotherapy treatments, Andrew made us feel special. But I also know that he put together similar packages of clippings for other friends. In some cases, he was mailing them these packages across the country. He also, so Andrew made other people feel special too, just like us. He also demonstrated generosity in other ways. For instance, in the early 1980s, Andrew was the elevator operator in the historic Goodham Works building, Toronto's so-called Flatiron building on Wellington Street. One of my colleagues at the Globe, Mary Goodham, was a descendant of the famous liquor-producing family, but she'd never been in the building. So Andrew gave her a personalized tour of the place. Saw where great relatives had their offices and stuff like that. She was thrilled. Andrew was always giving of himself. He was a regular blood donor. He volunteered for organizations like Toronto Film Festival, and I think for a period of time he was the treasurer of the local NDP riding. His work in community radio at CIUT and CKLN can't be underestimated. He provided in-depth interviews with leading scholars, including the world-renowned linguist and social critic Noam Chomsky. Andrew went to great lengths to get these to interview people who could articulate a progressive causes. Some years ago, Andrew and I went to visit our friend Martin, who we'll be talking later, who at that period of time was the Globe and Mail's financial correspondent in New York. Andrew brought along his heavy equipment, old-fashioned tape recorder, and we traveled up to the Upper West Side to the apartment of one of the Berrigan brothers. These were two Roman Catholic priests who organized resistance against the Vietnam War. But now, I can't remember which one of the Berrigan brothers we visited. Was it Daniel or was it Phil? That, of course, is something that Andrew never would have forgotten. Andrew had an amazing memory, which you all know. Anyways, Andrew interviewed the Berrigans and then played the tape on his radio show. This kind of reporting was not something you would normally hear on conventional, commercial radio. Andrew was giving people who lived within his broadcast area something really special. It's also worth mentioning that Andrew regularly wrote letters to the editor, and these were frequently published in the pages of the Toronto Star in particular, Globe and Mail occasionally. But I can tell you, because I work in the newspaper business, it isn't easy to get a letter published in the newspaper. Editors receive literally hundreds of letters every day. So if you have, you have to make a significant point in a very clear and concise way. The fact that his letters were published so often is a testament to his skills as a writer and a thinker. As I mentioned earlier, Andrew has a remarkable memory, and he hated to see mistakes in newspapers. When he noticed one, he would contact the paper and request a correction. On more than one occasion, he did this with the New York Times, especially when it involved mistakes about Canada. So, when Andrew worked as a researcher at the Canadian Bureau of the LA Times, he would often receive invitations to major events in Toronto. Andrew often asked me to tag along with him. One time, we went to an event where former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney was speaking. And just by a strange quirk of fate, we walked into the men's washroom to hear Mulroney complaining about his coverage in the Globe and Mail. Here was Mulroney saying these horrible things, and while he's urinating, Mulroney was on a bit of a rant. It was a surreal experience. Anyways, Andrew was always also although he helped me and many other people, he was incredibly grateful if you helped him. If you had him over for dinner, he would send you a handwritten thank you. Andrew was a guy with class and manners. His parents really raised him well. Sorry. Andrew also had a unique ability to forge closer relationships with people from all walks of life. For instance, he was good friends with Gabriel and Joseph Coco, who wrote scores of books on history and the global economy. So here is Andrew hobnobbing with world-renowned intellectuals. And yet Andrew had no pretensions of his own. In fact, he considered himself to be just a big kid. He still loved playing with his Hot Wheels. He never lost his childhood sense of wonder at the world around him. And I think that is why so many people consider Andrew to be one of their closest friends. He was fun to be with. He was both brilliant and also vulnerable. So Andrew really made a big difference, made the world a better place, and he will be greatly missed by all you, and certainly by me. Thank you.
Now Andrew's good friend Martin Middlestead is going to come up and say a few words.
I'd like to talk about a point in Andrew's life that I think, looking at Andrew as from the outside, I think would amount to the most interesting and exciting period in his life, and that was in the early 1980s. I met Andrew in a group called the Committee of Solidarity with the People of El Salvador. It was a group that was trying to, it and a sister organization with a similar name in the U.S. was trying to create a political opening here to allow social movements in Central America to be successful. You know, they were like terrible dictatorships there, and Andrew, you know, was really motivated by what was happening there. It was one aspect of his activism, but that wasn't the most radical thing Andrew was engaged in. He was involved in another much more radical group called the Cruise Missile Conversion Project, and there are a number of his friends from that period here. And the project was trying to, through civil disobedience, civil disobedience and nonviolence, tried to stop the production of cruise missile guidance components at a Lytton plant in North Toronto. Andrew's was arrested many times as part of his civil disobedience efforts, and the most noteworthy to me was when he was arrested at the Griffiths Air Force Base in upstate New York. It was mentioned in his obituary, but it perhaps not with all the color that it deserved. The base was where U.S. bombers were stationed. I don't know if it was nuclear weapons ready or whatever, but Andrew and a small number of other people snuck into the base, and surprisingly enough, nobody stopped them, and I believe they walked onto the runway, at least that's what he told me, and they sat there have been about a dozen of them, waiting to be arrested, and eventually they were spotted. A group of soldiers raced to them in vehicles. And I think Andrew mentioned to me that they were pointing submachine guns at his head, and I think his words at the time were that they didn't look too pleased and they didn't look too friendly. Now, while, you know, when you close your eyes and think of what a typical activist might look like, you probably think of more on the hippy-dippy spectrum. Andrew was anything but. He was this, you know, very clean-cut looking person with blonde hair. He had the lucky attribute that, you know, you can see from the pictures that he maintained his boyish good looks throughout his life. But he, you know, as he was leading this incongruent, or this, he didn't look like what you think a typical activist would look like. And while he was doing this, by day he was the elevator operator that Paul spoke about, and he had this kind of Clark Kent-like existence, is how I sort of framed it in my mind at the time. By day he was the unassuming elevator operator. At night and all the rest of the time he was trying to change society for the better. You know, he was the elevator operator, but he was unusual because he usually had a stack of Wall Street journals, New York Times, Globe and Mail, Financial Times, and, you know, any highbrow newspaper that you can think of, you know, Andrew would have there by his side, which I assume he read, you know, most days while he was taking lawyers up and down the building. I've known Andrew for more than 4 decades, and I can't explain fully why kind of an unassuming guy from 1970s Toronto in the suburbs transformed into quite a radical peace activist in the 80s. I think it speaks to his moral character and a sense of justice. But, you know, Andrew was, I think, the Hamburglar, wasn't he? So the Hamburglar turns into a radical activist, you know, one aspect of his life. I don't know if he got out of the kitchen at McDonald's because, you know, because he couldn't take the stress or something. But then, you know, he did the Hamburglar for a while. He also, you know, this is also something unusual about Andrew. He was a young conservative, a young PC, I think, originally. He was active in high school in the PC circles. And I know he mentioned to me once that a number of the young conservatives that he befriended at the time ended up in this higher senior ranks of the party in Ontario and federally. I think he once mentioned that some of the young PCs that he hung out with, he met them at their university dorms, and they had pictures of Pinochet and Margaret Thatcher there and hanging on their walls. And maybe there was something there that happened. I can only say that for someone who wanted to transform the world for the better, Andrew was willing to put a lot on the line for his beliefs, and those beliefs must have been, incredibly deeply held. Andrew often went through cycles of, incredible commitment and then disillusionment, and I think he had that in his activist period. He ceased being that radical Andrew, and I think that he has circles of friends from other periods in his life here. I view that as the sort of the most dramatic part of the Andrew that I knew. I don't want to dwell, on this radical period in his life, because I think it was only a small aspect of his life. He had further transformations. Paul touched on this, but I want to mention that Andrew had this thing that I can only describe as a kind of a childlike wonder about everything around him, and even ordinary things in the world. When we went kayaking last summer, a mute swan kind of, glided by our boat, and Andrew had to stop, and he had to take a picture of that swan. And then when we paddled over to the other side of the harbor, to the mouth of the Don, and this kind of post-industrial landscape of the Gardner and the decrepit industrial wasteland there, he had to have pictures of that too, and they appeared later on his Facebook page. There are pictures that you see of him by the airport, and he just had this wonder of watching planes land and take off. He just delighted in that. The same with the classic car exhibition that he went to most recently in Toronto. For me, Andrew also had what Paul mentioned. He had this incredible, endearing attribute of making us all feel special. Like Paul mentioned, if he knew you were interested in something, a series of clippings would quickly materialize. Andrew, he was obviously keeping you in mind as he thumbed through the 4 or 5 newspapers he read every day. If you had a difficult period in your life, Andrew was there. He'd be at your side. He remembered my birthday, everybody else's birthday that I can think of. He could recall a day and the year and often the date of things that you did with Andrew that were significant to him. He could recall it. It's just an amazing ability. And it's something that always made me feel special. But I'd just like to say that Andrew is incredibly special. And we'll miss him.
Thank you so much, Martin. Paul Price, where is Paul Price? He's going to come and say a few words. This is Andrew's longest friends from grade school. That guy did not let go of friends, did he?
I'm one of the other Pauls. I've known Andrew since kindergarten, so it's a long time. We had many adventures together. I'll kind of cut to the chase because of what Paul and we say, and he has a generous heart. He's well-read. He's researches. He knows what he's talking about. If you have a topic you want to talk about, Andrew's the guy to go to. He's got a memory like nobody else I've ever known. He knows the date, the time of what event you were at. He knows exactly what happened. Politically activated, he was with the Young Conservatives, and I was a cohort in that as well. And we, as we said, when you get disillusionment, we both went through the same thing where you realize that's not what we thought it was, let's go that direction. And you go that direction, you realize, oh, that's not what we thought it was, we'll go that direction. We research, no, that's not what we thought it was, and everything kind of falls apart. But Andrew and I became really, really tight in junior high and also in high school when we started doing the Mud Break school trips. We did the Spain trip in 1977 together. We were roommates, first time away from home, and we became like two peas in a pod. There's a few pictures back in there of when we had hair and we were much better looking than we are now. And we went to Israel in 1979, where the more devious side of Andrew would come out, where we would be up in the Golan Heights and we see a sign that says "Danger Mines." So what do Andrew and I do? We start picking up rocks and throwing them into the fields and see if we can trigger a land. No such luck. We also met some of the UN peacekeepers at the Good Fence and things that you can't do today, but we were wearing UN helmets and they gave us M16s to hold on to, so we had our pictures taken with M16s and UN peacekeeping helmets and they're smiling away thinking that this is all normal. It's just stuff that you wouldn't be able to do today. Andrew joined Canada World Youth. We were in touch when he was in BC, when he was in India. We were writing postcards back and forth. Andrew was a guy who loved postcards, as probably most of you know. If he was somewhere, didn't matter where it was or where I was somewhere, he always got a postcard. I still have stacks of postcards from what Andrew sent me. To university, Andrew was always the kind of guy, if we lost touch for a year or two, he was always the kind of guy you could pick up the phone, say hi, and it was as if it was yesterday that you were talking, and let's go out and have a beer. And it was as if you hadn't missed a beat with him. And as far as the newspaper clippings go, I was one of those guys that got the packages of newspaper clippings. Mine was baseball, hockey, New York Times, New York Post, Globe and Mail. The thing that hit me hard, I've been trying to see, the last time I saw Andrew was in February, right after he had his neck surgery. I dropped in to see him down at he was at Mount Sinai, the Mount Sinai prison, as he called it. And we went to the room. Paul Taylor was here in the morning, I was here in the afternoon, and he said, let's go for a walk. So he takes me to the gallery, the art gallery where he's working. He takes me to all these little nooks and crannies of places that he found, because Andrew wasn't the kind of guy who would sit in his room all day, being treated. It's like it just wasn't his style. So we went out on University Avenue and we started heading north. We're going up to Queens Park. We were like, where are we going? He goes, I think I'm going to stay in there all day? He goes, that's like a jail. I can't deal with that. The next day I called him and I couldn't get a hold of him, and about 2 hours later I was talking to him and I go, is everything okay? He goes, yeah, I went for a walk. Yeah, where'd you go? He goes, I went home to have a beer. I said, you did what? He goes, well, I think I'm going to be there all day. He goes, it's like a freaking jail. He said, no, I went home and had a beer, and then I came back. He goes, what? They don't know I'm gone. He goes, well, they're going, I'm down in the art gallery. I'm like, oh my God, Andrew. That was Andrew. To cut things a little short, when it came to the packages, right before my wife and I, we were away for a couple of weeks, we went camping, and I was talking to Andrew the week. We had been talking a lot over the last while when his cancer diagnosis came through, because I went through pancreatic cancer, and so he kind of had a real spot to talk to me about it. So I was getting a lot of information that maybe Audrey wasn't getting, or Paul wasn't getting, or any of our other friends wasn't getting. I was getting a lot of real meat and potatoes, because I guess he felt you've been through it, you get it, you understand it. And it's hard to be in that situation in some aspects, as much as you try to support him. And every time that we tried to get together to kind of sit down and have a conversation, he would always kind of bail because he had radiation treatment. He wasn't feeling well. I just want to go home and go to bed. All I want to do is just sleep. And I totally get that. So we kept making times to see each other, and then we kept bailing and stuff, so I called him a few days before we went camping. This was just before he passed away, and I called him on his birthday, which was the Wednesday, and wished him happy birthday and stuff. And then I didn't see that there was a post on his birthday, because he always posts when he's having a beer. He didn't post anything for his birthday. I thought that was rather odd. And because we were up at Bon Echo, which is a black hole of telecommunications, if anybody ever camps there, just you might as well just throw your phone away. I found out that Andrew had passed, and we had made plans to get together last week. He said, when you get back, he said, we'll get together. He said, I promise we'll kind of touch base. I didn't get that chance, and it's sort of, it's hard. It still hasn't sunk in, because I still think he's just going to pick up the phone and give me a call and start talking about what's going on down at Princess Margaret and how it's all crazy down there. But I know, as I said, cancer it's a hole, it's a pit. When you get into that pit, it depends how far you go. And Andrew, unfortunately, got into that pit and couldn't get out. But it was the only good thing that I can see is that it was quick. He didn't go through, because nobody expected it. Nobody saw this coming. Everybody was losing weight, and he kept telling me, I'm losing weight, I'm not eating. But as much as we miss him, he's got to be in a better place. All the people here, this is incredible. Audrey's done an amazing job of, keeping things going for him, and he's got a litany. He's got friends from all over, from the peace movement, from his days at CIUT, from Ryerson, from Newtonbrook, from Canada World Youth, from all different walks of life. He was the kind of guy, he can make friends with everybody and anybody and make you feel at home and make you feel comfortable. We're going to miss him. And yeah, I love the guy to death. It's tough. Oh, package. I got the newspaper clippings. I got my package the day that we got home, and it was 3 days after he passed away. So when my neighbor brought my mail over, I goes, "Is everything I got a package," and I saw this flat rate box, and really, seriously? It's like, okay. And then I didn't open it for like 4 days. I couldn't do it. So I opened it. I'm starting to go through the clippings now. So everyone has a little more meaning to it today than they always did, but it's just got a little more meat to it. Anyway, thank you. So.
I'm now going to call on Paul Edwards. There's Paul. There we go. Paul will tell you how they met. And I just want to make note that Paul and his wife Ann flew in from Winnipeg to be here tonight. So.
Thanks, Roger. Yes, I've realized the only reason Andrew befriended me is because my name was Paul. I want to. You've all been standing a long time, and I want to start by thanking Paul and Martin for their words, and I'm not going to repeat them. I, of course, agree with all of them. We have many of the same anecdotes all the way through in the characteristics that made Andrew an incredibly unique guy. I am Paul Edwards, and I met Andrew on Canada World Youth. We were 18, and yes, he was a young conservative then, and he had been the Hamburglar that summer, and I was very involved in the Liberal Party. And people have mentioned here and said, well, Andrew had very strong views on the left, and then they shifted, they went back and forth, and there was some anxiety in between that. I used to tell Andrew, I never had that problem. I'm a liberal. We'll compromise on anything. So you just gotta stick to the middle. I don't, and we had a shared interest in politics and history and geography. And that was a great bond of ours. And we saw each other over the years. I didn't live in Toronto, so it was when I was here, or he would come see us at one of our homes. And through that, got to know my wife, Ann. He's known her pretty much the same period of time as he's known me and our children, and now our grandchildren, and both of our sets of parents. He's known our whole family. And they all just are so saddened by this loss. They know the character he had and the character he was. And you know, Andrew made me realize something. Every time I saw him, I would realize how incredibly boring every other friend I had was. And I myself was boring. And I just realized, you know, this guy really adds to my life. He was so unique. And my daughter said it as I was telling her we were coming out here. My daughter, who's known him many decades now, said, you know, the thing about Andrew was he was authentic. Andrew was Andrew, and there was nothing that was going to change his authenticity, who he was. He cut his own path in this world and in this life. And I really honor that. And I am envious of that. He did things his way. And it wasn't always easy, and it certainly wasn't always pretty. And, you know, we all know he could drive you crazy. Andrew could drive you nuts as he went back to check the door 26 times or something. You know, I mean, that was him. But he had a heart of gold. He had a heart of gold. He was the best friend I've ever had, probably will ever have. He would do anything. And as was mentioned earlier, when I'd call him, sometimes been months, it was like we talked 5 minutes ago. It's just that kind of a relationship. So I'm so saddened by this. And the fact that he was both interested in the world and interesting, and the two go together. It's been said by others more eloquently than me, but he had that curiosity, that ability to take the mundane every moment, every day, and see something and look for something and just live life as if it was an adventure every day. So I learned that from him, and I'll be forever grateful. Now I want to say a couple of other short things. I want to thank Audrey for what she's done in organizing this event. It's incredible, Audrey. Thank you so much for what you've done. Andrew knew two things about you. And by the way, we had a wonderful stroke of luck that we saw Andrew for 4 days. In March, he came to visit us. And we were talking, and he mentioned that he knew he was quite different than his sister Audrey, quite different in terms of temperaments, aptitudes, these things. Yes. But he also knew a second thing, which was the skills you had were good for him. He loved that condo, and you got that for him. And that wasn't the only thing. There were many things that you did for him, and he honored those. Whether he said them to you or not, he said them to me. Secondly, I want to pay a special recognition to Khalid, who I've heard about all these years. Khalid, and I've had conversations with him a couple of times. But Khalid, you were a special, special friend to Andrew. And I know that you were to him as well. And I want to express on all our behalf our heartfelt condolences to you, Khalid, because you were a very special man. So let me just end by on a bit of a lighter note that, you know, these packages, they would come to us every month, and it was so interesting. They would change always, you know, lots of articles for me. My wife Ann loves to cook, so he'd always send her the latest whatever cooking magazine that he'd come across or something. He would always send those to her. And then we had a couple of grandchildren that he met. And we started getting Mattel Hot Wheels in our package as well. That was Andrew. He was on top. He was thinking about us. He was thinking about us and our grandkids. Wouldn't they love these Hot Wheels? And by the way, he had about 5,000. Unopened. So that was him, and we're forever grateful for the gift he was in our lives. And I know we're not going to come across Andrew Van Bell's again. So it's a day of sadness, but I'm so grateful to have had all these decades with him in my life, making it interesting, making it fun, and teaching me how to be a better friend to others, because he was to me. Thank you very much for having
I just want to point out that Paul was insistent on flying Andrew to Florida with his wife for 4 days, and he flew him there, and I don't know how Andrew got in that cockpit of Flair Airlines, but he got in there and he posted about it, and he sent me pictures, so.
He got on in every flight there.
Yeah, he did. Okay, I'm gonna say a few words to finish things off. Okay. I'm going to make this very light. So, Andrew was 7 years older than me, and my brother Rob was 8 years older. They were only 13 months apart, so they were almost Irish twins, but they were very, very different. Andrew was born several weeks early, and my mom would always say to him, "Oh, that's the only time you've ever been early for anything." And if you know Andrew, you know he was always late. So, but also, if you know Andrew, you would know it was never his fault. It was always the fault of the TTC. It was never Andrew's fault. He didn't leave late, there was a subway closure, a jumper, whatever there was, but it was never Andrew's fault. We didn't do a lot of big family vacations when we grew up, but we did go out east. 1975, we drove out to the East Coast. We piled in my dad's Buick. There we were, Andrew, Rob, and I got the hump in the middle, and my parents were diligently working through a carton of Rothmans to get there. Windows closed, air conditioning on, oh yeah. There's very few things I remember from that trip, but I remember the cigarettes, sitting on the hump. I remember going through a coal mine, and I remember a really cool trampoline at one of the motels we stayed at. That was it. But Andrew, he could tell you every part of that trip. He could tell you what cities we went to. He can tell you what tourist attractions we went to. It's already said tonight, that guy had an amazing memory. Anyways, it took 31 years later when we went on our next family vacation, and we went to Mexico, and it was 2006, and my parents wanted to do a trip, the entire family. So now we were a bigger family. We had my nieces, Cassie and Sammy, Rob's wife, Jan, myself, my 2 kids, John, my parents, and we were gonna bring Andrew, and we were bringing him to an all-inclusive. You know Andrew, outside of the unlimited beer, an all-inclusive had nothing attractive to that guy, but he took one for the team. So, day 3, Andrew's losing his mind in this all-inclusive. The walls are closing in, and he's gonna go, we're in the Mayan Riviera, and he's gonna go to see the ruins in Tulum. And we were like, well, he can't go alone. No, he's like mid-40s. We can't let him go to Tulum by himself. So my husband, John, who is a saint, said, I'll go with him. And I was like, are you getting away from your 5 and 7-year-old for the day, or are you really going with them? But anyways, so John figures they're gonna go up to the front desk, book a cushy tour to Tulum. Oh no, that's not the way Andrew rocked. Next day, there are John and Andrew crossing the highway, getting on a local Mexican bus to Tulum. And if you know my husband, if you can picture him on this local bus going down to Tulum. But Andrew still spoke of that day so fondly. He took 150 pictures of nothing. And then at the end of the day, John's like, how are we gonna get home? And Andrew was like, well, we'll get a bus back. So they went, because well, first we gotta go to a bar. So they went to a bar and they sat there and they said to the bartender, we gotta get back to the Barcello, it's in the Mayan. He goes, I'll tell you when the bus comes, and then run like hell and get it. So that's what they did. So, yeah. But, you know, he spoke fondly, and he often spoke fondly of that day to John. And it's been mentioned, but Andrew was fascinated with travel and postcards. He loved his postcards, and, you know, people sent them every time. You know, I think there's a lot of people here tonight that would send him a postcard. You know, going through his condo in the last week, I feel as though there probably isn't a country in the world that Paul and Bronwyn haven't been to, because I must have found 1,000 postcards from different places, honestly. And you know, sending a postcard is actually very challenging. Postcards are easy to find. Stamps and mailboxes, not so much these days. So, but I think about the triggers that will affect me down the road, and it is a trip and not sending him a postcard, because that's what we did, and he loved it. He absolutely loved it. In addition to collecting postcards, Andrew collected everything. He collected Hot Wheels. Yes, Paul, I've got some more for your grandkids. I have 2,000 in a box. He collected Blackberries. Yep, every Blackberry known, I have it. He collected Macintosh computers. He collected Lego. He collected rotary phones. He collected typewriters. We have 9 vintage typewriters right now. I'm gonna miss things that he collected. Hang on. He collected corks, wine corks. If you had a bottle of wine with Andrew, he took the cork. And I was like, what the heck? And sure enough, he made cork boards. You know what for? His postcards. So he just had everything. He collected mini Eiffel Towers. He collected beer glasses, which, God, I hope everyone takes tonight. And he collected the front page of every newspaper of every world event that ever happened. And we have found it. In fact, some of the beer glasses are wrapped in those tonight. But it's like, I said to Khalid, why does he have all this? Khalid's like, he really liked to, you know, have that front page. It was meaningful to him. But the thing in the world he collected the most of was books. He had so many books. Oh my God. He would say to me, Aj, there's no such thing of having too many books. You can't have too many books. Well, you know what, Andrew? When you live in a 600 square foot condo, there is such a thing as having too many books, and I can tell you that. But we're now discovering storage lockers we didn't know about for the books. Anyways. Oh my gosh. Andrew could literally give you the capital of every country in the world. As people talked about earlier, his memory was unbelievable. It was really, really cool. So this week I was going through some pictures, many pictures as you can see, a lifetime of pictures, and I came across an essay that Andrew wrote me. 1990, I needed to take one more course to graduate from Western, and it was called Nassar and His Relations with the Western Powers. And it was an international politics course. It was the only one offered in the summer. And Andrew wrote my essay, and here it is. And it cost me $200 in long distance, so from London, Ontario to Toronto. And we only got a 67, and Andrew was pissed. I didn't care. I was just happy I graduated. I was like, hallelujah. But it was amazing. And then I, of course, had to go to the library and do a bibliography of like crap, because it was all Andrew in here. But he was amazing. But the year before that, it was even more interesting. I was telling Andrew about this restaurant at Western called Joe Cool's, and I was like, it's like this place, and it just like, it's on like, you know, you just crappy service, crappy food. Those were their advertising slogans. You know, great nachos, and Andrew was enamored with it. He's like, tell me more. So I told him more, and then he called the owner, Mike Smith, and he wrote an article. And it was published on the front page of the Report on Business of the Globe and Mail. And I have it here tonight. I filed it, and I'm so happy this week when I found it. A year later, after I graduated, thanks to Andrew, Rob and him, my oldest brother Rob, they rented a U-Haul and came and picked me up to pick up my furniture. And we went to Joe Cool's for lunch. Andrew had never been to Joe Cool's, wrote the article, got it published, the whole bit, never been there. And we had lunch at Joe Cool's, and there was his article framed on the wall, and that was one of his happiest days. But that was just, he was such a great writer. It was just his gift. And then I came across his report cards from this week. Oh my God, he kept everything. Grade 1 to grade 4, Willowdale Boys Christian Boys School. Honest to God, it's hilarious. D in Bible studies, D in math, A+ in geography. You know, it was just like so typical. And then I laughed and said, like, promoted to grade 2. Like, promoted to grade 2. I wrote, like, what kind of promotion is that? So, anyhow, I just can't believe he kept those. So working. So, kind of a family trait. Andrew hated working for people. Rob hated working for people. I hate working for people. That was probably the only thing we had in common. But he hated being told what to do, and he also hated having to be on time. But he had a fantastic work ethic. It's been mentioned several times tonight that he worked at the Gooderham and Words building as the elevator operator. That was a job he loved, and he used to tell me it's not easy, Odge, to like pull down that clamp right at the floor and make sure it was level so those lawyers can't get off and do their work. But it was this week, and I was going through his jobs and his life to write his obituary, which Paul and Martin helped me with so much, that Jan reminded me that he worked in the mailroom of this big major law firm for years. And Jan said, I can't remember what the law firm was. Because Andrew only called them Dewey, Fuck 'em, and How. That was it. And I said to Jan, what was that law firm called? She goes, I don't know, we only had one name for it. And I'm pretty sure he got fired, but it was called Lang Missioner because Paul Taylor remembered that. Thank you, Paul. He had a real disdain for working with the general public, probably because he was so intelligent, but he did stick it out at Grandin Toy for many years. And that guy knew every office product ever known to mankind. He made so many good friends at Grandin Toy. It was amazing. But his best job of all times, and I think we would all agree, was when he was a researcher for the LA Times. The only person he ever loved working for was Mary Walsh, the foreign correspondent. He could come and go on his own time. He could do his thing. He did a great job for them. And it was, really, really sad that they had to close that foreign correspondent bureau office because that was his dream job and something he was really, really good at. But Andrew loved Toronto. This was his favorite city in the world. I remember when I went to get him a cell phone and we were at the Bell store and he had to have a 416 exchange and we sat there for 35 minutes waiting for a 416 exchange to come up. No, he was not having 647. No way, that is not Toronto. And he also, oh my gosh, he had a love-hate relationship with the TTC. And he was the first to ride the Shepherd Line. He was the first to ride the Up Express. He was the first to ride the Vaughan Extension. He just loved Toronto. And I know if the Eglinton line ever opened, he would have been the first to ride that as well. That was his thing. He was such a big advocate for public transit. But we also know that he loved the CN Tower. That was his thing. He was one of the first people up the CN Tower in 1976. And you think back to the things you've done in your life and getting him that condo on Fox Bar with a view of the CN Tower every night was probably one of the greatest gifts to him. And so happy we could pull it off. But in true Andrew form, he was like, Aj, you're competitive. You can get this. I know you can do it. I'm not taking 501. I want 701. Anyways, we got it, and thank God we did. So it's interesting when Paul and the Pauls and Martin were talking tonight. I want to say there's 3 words that describe Andrew: reliable, generous, and grateful. He was so frickin' reliable, it was unbelievable. And I think we'd all agree, he never bailed. When he was coming, he was coming. He was never a no-show. He was late, for sure, but he was never a no-show. 100%, he was gonna be there. When Sarah and Ryan were about 7 and 9, we were desperate for a babysitter, like desperate. So we called Andrew, last resort. And we said, we need a babysitter for Saturday night. And he was like, yeah, you got beer? And I was like, yeah, we got beer. Okay, I can do it. All right. So, but I knew he wouldn't bail. Once he committed, he was there. John picked him up at the bus. Andrew walked in the front door and he said, hey guys, Uncle Buck reporting for duty. And I'll never forget that. And you know what? He was an Uncle Buck, 100%. And I just want to say it was so fitting that I'd made Andrew 100,000 soups at the end of May, and my kids, Sarah and Ryan, and Sarah's boyfriend, Matt, took the soups to him and had dinner with him at Union Social. It was such a nice night. And it was so fun. They were picking us up at our friends for dinner, and Andrew had already posted about it on Facebook. It was so cute. God, Andrew was generous. You know, he didn't have much, but if he did, he shared it. And he was the most generous person in the room. Last year, when our mom passed away, I had sent an Uber to pick him up to bring him to the funeral home. And we were waiting for him in the parking lot, and he got out of the Uber. And after he thanked the guy 10 times, he said, don't worry, my sister's gonna give you a big tip. And I can hear him, like, Lydian, my sister will give you a big tip. It's just all you hear, and I'm just like, oh my God. Of course, I'm like, was the Uber clean? You know, I'm like, was it a good drive? Before I give him 5 stars, I need to know these things. And lastly, grateful. He was so appreciative of the support of his family and Jan and Rob for so many years, and us and his friends, and Paul and Martin and Andrew Brooks, and he just really appreciated everything people done for him, and you knew that because as you people have mentioned, he was authentic, like he meant it. Andrew would love to leave voicemails after he had dinner at your house. And they were so long that the tape would run out. And then he would call back. I don't know if he got the message, and I know I'm rambling. And then he would try and condense the message, and that tape would run out. And then he would leave a third, and it was just, right? You know it. And then you were like, oh, for God's sakes, we get it. You're thankful. We had dinner. It was good. But he always left a rambling message on your birthday. And everyone's birthday, and later years he would text. But my husband's birthday is the most iconic. My husband John's born on July 20th. Man walked on the moon, 1969, and this would be the message for years. Hey John, it's Ange. Happy birthday. Happy birthday, man, July 20th. Man walked on the moon. A great birthday. Oh my God, you were probably 3. Yeah, you were probably 3. You were probably at the cottage when man walked on the moon. Oh fuck. So great, eh? Never forget your birthday. Man walked on the moon. Great birthday. Oh my God, iconic. So good. Yeah. So listen, I hope you're at the cottage. I hope you're enjoying yourself. I hope my sister's not a bitch to you today. I just really hope you are having a great day. Happy birthday, man. Iconic birthday. July 20th. Man walked on the moon. And that would go on for 20 minutes. Like just about that. In later years, he would text that, and we could probably go back on John's phone and see that exact text, you know, maybe minus the bitch, but you know, maybe not. But John will be sad on Saturday because that was Andrew's thing, you know. Andrew's currency, it's been said tonight, for showing appreciation, cutting articles and recipes out of the paper, mainly the New York Times, but other papers. If he knew you were interested, he would cut the articles out. Tennis for me, Wayfair was a big client, he would cut stacks of articles out about them. Everything. I know for Ann and Paul, he would send you the Food and Drink magazine because you're in Winnipeg, and cut recipes out. And like, I think the LCBO can cut back their press production by like 20% because he must have stole 150 food and drinks every time he went to the LCBO, which was a lot. I'm like, Andrew, you know these are free, right? We all get them, but no, that was his thing. But that was how he said thank you for his generosity. If you were a friend to Andrew's, you know you're a friend for life. He kept in touch with so many people. Andrew had a huge heart, and we're pretty sure in the end, it was that huge heart that gave out on him. Kind of ironic maybe, but man, he was a good brother. And I love you, and I just would love everyone to raise a glass to a
son, brother, uncle, and a best friend to so many. Please raise your glass. Thank you. Okay, that's it. Please remember to take a glass tonight too, so I don't have to take them home. I appreciate everyone coming.
I just want to say one last thing. Amongst Andrew's friends, I want to thank his friend Khalid, who was really there for him when he was sick. And Khalid, you were the best friend a guy could have, and so non-judgmental. You just rolled with it with Andrew, and that's what he loved about you. So, thank you guys.